Hello and welcome to this very special program. It is unique because it reveals the story behind a watershed in Nigeria's political history. In 1993, Nigeria took a huge step towards entrenching democratic governance. The build-up had been slow and arduous. It stemmed from a transition program put in place by the military government of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, who came to power after a coup that overthrew the then head of state, Major General Buhari, in 1985. The Babangida years were replete with false starts of a return to civil rule. The last started in 1992 and culminated in a presidential election in June 1993. But democratic governance was not to be, as the result was never officially declared and the entire process was eventually annulled. Now that was the genesis of the saga famously known as June 12. Two key actors were Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party SDP, the acclaimed winner of the election, and Ambassador Babagana Kingibe, his vice presidential candidate. In all the years after the annulment of June 12 and the ensuing crisis, which resulted in General Babangida stepping aside and installing an interim national government that was short-lived, Ambassador Kingibe never spoke publicly of the circumstances that surrounded the aborted mandate and his eventual serving in the government of General Sani Abacha, who sacked the interim government of Chief Ernest Shuneko and incarcerated Chief Abiola. His very first media interview on the matter was to the Nigerian Television Authority, aired on June 12, now Nigeria's Democracy Day. In the program One-on-One, Ambassador Kingibe disclosed that he had recorded his recollection of the June 12 story.
I have actually recorded my recollections of those days and those events. And we're looking at about 1.5 hours of recording. If your bosses will allow me to use their medium, I'll be very happy to release it. But that's discussion for another time. Yeah.
Well, he has a veiled NTA of that recording, and we bring you Ambassador Kingibe's recorded recollection of the June 12 saga, made available exclusively to the Nigerian Television Authority.
Well, clearly it was a choice he made. It was a decision he made. If you will recall, it was a long time before he was able to make up his mind. As you can imagine, under these circumstances of a presidential candidate emerging, that there would be many pressures on him. And also you will recall that he had earlier entered into an agreement with General Shehu Yaradua and the Atiku Abubakar group, that in return for their support to him in the runoff primaries between me and him, he would pick Atiku Abubakar as his running mate. Clearly, the incumbent president at the time was not totally disinterested in the ticket, and one understood that he had his own ideas as to who he would have wished MKO Abiola to pick as his running mate. So I'm sure all these pressures must have had their bearing on him. But eventually he decided that perhaps with me on the ticket he stood the best chance of winning the elections. I should imagine that's how it came about. No, clearly I wasn't his choice. As MKO Abiola told me, when he went to inform General Babangida, as he then was, that he had decided to pick me as his running mate, Babangida was not pleased at all. And he told him, according to MKO Abiola, that why should he pick a Muslim as a running mate? Because a Muslim ticket was going to undo all that he had done in order to create a Muslim-Christian balance. And apparently he had even suggested, why should he not consider somebody like Pascal Bafia? Now, that is what MKO Abiola told me. I wasn't there, but that is clearly an indication that I wasn't Babangida's favorite as a running mate. No, far from it. I was, if you remember, the national chairman of the party, and my concern and focus was that this party, which I had nurtured from birth, so to speak, since the creation of the SDP and the NRC, a party which I led to 2 elections previously, to the National Assembly elections, to the gubernatorial elections, and to the local government elections, crowned obvious success by clinching the presidential election. So that was my focus, that was my concentration. And I was urging him all the time to kindly make up his mind quickly, with not me in my mind at all, that he should pick his running mate so that we can launch our campaign. Because at that particular point in time, the opposition NRC candidate, Alhaji Bashir Tofa, had gone far in his campaign around the country. I believe he had covered about 4 states already, and we were behind. So me being the running mate was far from my mind, and I never thought of it for a second, let alone lobby for it. The very day that MKO told me that he was picking me as his running mate, I was in Plateau State. In fact, I was in Miango. I was commissioning an orphanage that was built by the wife of the governor, Fidelis Tapgun. We were in the middle of that commissioning when Kola Abiola appeared and said that his father wanted to see me in Abuja. I told him if he didn't mind, I would complete the commissioning and then I would be happy to follow him. He had a plane waiting in Jos. So we came over to Abuja, and MKO Abiola then informed me that he had made up his mind he was going to pick me as his running mate. Well, first of all, I was very conscious of the fact that I could add value to the ticket. But I didn't have to be on the ticket to add value. I was already the national chairman of the party. And I had my own support base, which I could bring on board to ensure the success of our candidates. Because I wasn't expecting it, I was surprised and taken aback. But nevertheless, what I told him was, look, it's all very well for you to decide to pick me as your running mate, but have you discussed it within the party leadership? Have you discussed it, for example, with President Babangida? Because if you remember, the atmosphere and the context of those elections was still the transition program, which was being run by President Babangida. And the transition program had had several setbacks. And it would have been wise for him to have discussed it with him, or at least intimated him that that was how his mind was working. He told me, no, he hadn't discussed it with Babangida or with anybody. It's his decision, and he had made up his mind. Now, I did tell him that really he should reflect. This is politics of the transition. It would not be fair, because that was on a Tuesday. And the following day, on Wednesday, we were going to launch the presidential campaign in Kaduna. So I told him, look, you better make sure that you tell Babangida he should not hear it on the radio that this was the decision you have made. And you should inform some of the party leaders. I was aware by then of the deal he had made with General Yaradua that he should pick Atiku Abubakar as his running mate. that he should discuss with people like that. And he agreed. And he said, but what do? We are going to launch the campaign tomorrow, and my intention was to announce the decision tomorrow. I said, you don't have to announce the decision. Let's go to Kaduna, launch the campaign, inform everybody that you will announce your running mate by the weekend latest. Then come, inform the president and inform the party leaders. He agreed, but he said he wasn't able to see President Babangida. He had tried to get an appointment and he couldn't. I undertook to get across to President Babangida, which I did. And President Babangida gave him an appointment for Friday after mosque. Now imagine we had this conversation on Tuesday. We were going to launch, and we did launch, the campaign on Wednesday. And President Babangida gave him an appointment for Friday. So the announcement had to be held in abeyance. And when he saw President Babangida and informed him, he hadn't informed the other leaders of the party. I told him that it was still important that he should inform all the important stakeholders. He said he would phone them. I said, no, this, especially General Yaradua, given that you had entered into an agreement, which you are not following through now, it's important you go personally and meet him. I believe in the end he didn't. He just phoned him, and maybe he informed everybody else by phone. And he made the announcement over the weekend. I must say, I was never of the view that he didn't want to go. No, that never crossed my mind. After the event, perhaps that might be the case, but at no point in time during that time did I think that he didn't want to go. I just think that he wanted to choreograph the whole program, and he wanted an outcome of his own design. No, I didn't think personally that I didn't have any doubt that he meant to conclude the process at some point of his choice and go. Actually, I was like, in fact, many of the actors in Katsina at the burial of the father of Shehu Musa Yaradua. His father died. We all went to Katsina for the burial. And President Babangida was there. MKO Abiola was there. As I said, many of the actors were there. I was there. And we had seen off the president at the airport in Katsina. And we came back to Katsina Government House to have lunch. And it was there that the rumors started flying, that there was an announcement. There was no author, there was no authority cited. It was just that the elections had been stopped. My reaction was one of incredulity, because President Babangida was with us at the burial ceremony, and he had just left. And clearly, the way he interacted with everybody did not indicate to me that he had foreknowledge of a decision that he might have taken before coming to Katsina. So I didn't believe it. MKO Abiola, I believe, had left town by that time. And I left thereafter. We came back, only to confirm that actually, yes, the announcement of the results had been stopped and the elections had been put on hold. So it was quite frankly an ambush for which nobody was prepared. It took quite a while for everybody to first believe what they heard, and now try to take stock of what are our next steps. So we were bewildered, we were incredulous, we were stunned because of the absolute impossibility of anybody trying to stop the elections at that point in time. When, you remember, we used the option A4 system. We all had the results from every polling unit. We had the collated results from all the local governments, from all the states. And we were just waiting. And INEC, or NEC as it was during Warsa's time, had started announcing the results, putting up the results on the board outside the NEC house headquarters. It was just the result of Taraba that was outstanding. So really, really, it was unstoppable, ordinarily. And yet, the unstoppable happened. So we were all shocked. We were shocked that some of the leaders that we thought would be at the forefront of trying to reverse that decision were in fact telling us at the meeting that, look, you can't fight the military. They have taken a decision. What are we going to do? We are powerless, and so on. I had always been a party man. I always worked within the context of the party. I highly valued party elected officials, party leaders at all levels as being our primary power source as a group. Now, MKO Abiola, I remember, was still trying to work on his network of friends within the military, principally President Babangida, to try and convince them to reverse the decision. So that's fine. There was no problem if he could talk to them. But clearly, the military didn't take such decision lightly. And clearly, also by that time, one was aware of the various camps that were interested in the annulment, all really for their personal ambitions, not really because they, as is said afterwards, that they were afraid of MKO or that MKO owed government so much and that if he became president, he would bankrupt the nation. All sorts of spurious and illogical arguments were put forward. But it was really a clash of ambitions. We decided that we were going to fight the interim national government of Chief Ernest Shonako. And we mobilized, and we made sure that that government didn't last. It lasted, what, 82, 84 days, thereabouts. And it had to give way. For various reasons, we now know that we were not the only ones undermining the interim national government, but the military themselves were undermining it. So we all fought together and in our different ways to make sure that the interim national government didn't succeed. Not really. The manner of his going was unorthodox. In fact, I was traveling home when I dropped by his house to say goodbye to him, only to be told by his wife, Doyne, that, oh, didn't I know he had taken off? I said, to where? He said he had taken off to London. And I was perplexed. I thought if he was going to travel out, the least he would do was to inform me, but he didn't. I understood later why, as he called later in the evening to tell me, oh, he was in London. He tried to reach me, he couldn't reach me, but he had left a message with my wife. Didn't she tell me? I said, no, I haven't been home. I was in fact traveling out. I returned home and I was given the message which he left to the effect that when a stone is coming, one bird doesn't tell another. I didn't understand the import of it until subsequently he told me that, oh, his informants within the security system told him that the security guys were on their way to him and to me, and they were going to pick us up, and that our lives were in danger, and that he had to leave right away. Now, that was what he was reacting to. Had I been told that, and had I been able to talk with him, I would have told him that that's a typical disinformation tactics of the security agencies. Despite all the things they could have done, eliminating us would have been a very difficult thing to imagine. But he was taken in, and he left. No, I was focused. I understood MKO. He was a great man. He had great strength, unparalleled courage. But he also had his weaknesses like all human beings. And I understood his weaknesses. He had never been in the public service at any level, civil servant or politician or whatever. He clearly didn't understand how the system worked. And I could explain it that way. I wasn't angry. I was surprised. So I led a delegation to see him in London. I went with Chief Olufalae, late Mahmoud Waziri, I remember, and others, to tell him of the necessity for his being there. He, again, is this gap in his life experience of not knowing how the system worked, that he told us that, oh, the British Foreign Office had told him that they were trying to arrange some kind of negotiation with Chief Shonokon, so he should wait. And I asked who told him. Was it the Foreign Secretary? Was it the Prime Minister? It was a lowly desk officer in the Foreign Office who was telling him that. I told him it's improbable that the British, who would be much happier with Chief Shonokon, who, if you remember, was the chairman of the UAC, a division of the Unilever Group, they would be much happier with such a person than him being the president. So I think there again, it was disinformation. It was an effort to keep him in London while Chief Shonokon consolidated his power. I laid it out to him. I urged him to come back, and that if he set a date, we will organize a convoy of vehicles to descend on Abuja. It will start in Kano. He should land in Kano, not in Lagos. And while the head of that convoy is in Abuja, the tail would still not have left Kano. And let us see who was going to attack us. All that was laid to him, but he was persuaded that you know, he should give a chance to the efforts of the British government. We came back, and you'll recall the manner of his return. He came back on Air France. Those of us who were at the international airport to receive him, you know, there was a decoy. He landed at the presidential wing and he was whisked away. So the kind of reception we could have organized for him, even that, we were not able to do. So that's how it went. I understood that Chief Abiola had series of discussions with General Abacha, and he was given assurances about his mandate being returned to him. I certainly had my own efforts because I knew that with the military backing Chief Shanakon and with the waning of the resistance and the resolve of the people of Nigeria as a whole, the only weapon we could use was to set the military against themselves. So I was having discussions and with various groups and officers. And of course, we were all naive. And clearly, there were various groups jostling to topple the interim national government so that they take over the reins of power. And General Abacha and his group outmaneuvered all of them and outplayed we, the civilian political class also. Because I went to see him once at his own request. And he told me, look, how could he help us in our struggle? I told him that, look, we wanted the military not to harass the demonstrators, not to kill them. And if he personally wanted to help us, he could provide us logistic support, especially to the Nupeng, the oil sector trade union, that were effectively crippling the economy. He asked how he could. So I brought Chief Frank Kokori, the Secretary General of the Nupeng, who was at that point also the National Financial Secretary of the SDP. I brought him over to Abacha. They met. And Abacha decided to provide all the funds they needed to pay the striking workers and to fund the logistic requirements of Nupeng. Clearly, Abacha wanted the interim national government to be weakened so that he could strike for his own ends. But the impression given to us was so that he could assist us to reclaim our mandate. Now, Chief MKO Abiola never really told me the details of their discussions. But from what I've gathered, that is the kind of impression that he was given. So he was very enthusiastic. He welcomed the coup of General Abacha. If you remember, he went to congratulate him. And one of the difficulties I had in managing things at that point in time is that I remember I had given Bola Tinubu an appointment to see me in the house. And he then phoned to say MKO Abiola had just asked him to come over. Could we put the appointment for a later time? I said, fine. It was only then later to see on the television screen that MKO Abiola had asked Bola Tinubu to come and accompany him to see and congratulate General Abacha. MKO Abiola never discussed with me, never told me whether it was a good idea to do that. He had several meetings with the British ambassador, the American ambassador, and the British High Commissioner, the American ambassador, and others. Really, he never discussed the content of these conversations. So I wasn't clear. But the broad outline one got was that he too, like everybody else, was outmaneuvered by General Abacha. But be that as it may, I always insisted that he, MKO Abiola, or he and I, did not take decisions alone. Well, I clearly remember, again, I urged for that meeting, that I was a bit taken aback that evening that I was talking about when MKO asked Bola Tinubu to accompany him to Abacha's residence. I also noticed that people like Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, who had been writing and urging the military to take over from the interim government, was already there. There were many of the Southwest leadership who were there, welcoming Abacha. So it wasn't sufficient for Chief MKO Abiola to decide on the next steps, I felt, and I prevailed on him to call a meeting of the leadership of the SDP, which he convened in his house. Now, it was very interesting because as we were gathering, I clearly, of course, I had my ears very close to the various groups. The Igbo delegates went outside and had a meeting. And they decided that, look, this was a Yoruba fight. They should not be taking very strong stand in the meeting. They went back into the meeting. Yes, I remember Admiral Kanu spoke very strongly to reject the annulment, the takeover by Abacha, not to cooperate with him. Several others also spoke in the same vein. But majority told, in fact, Chief Abiola's line, which he outlined when he introduced the issue, that we should cooperate with the Abacha government, that he had undertaking that the mandate would be restored. And the decision by the vast majority, I think right now I can only recall Admiral Kanu, I can recall Bolade Oshunowo, who was the chairman of the SDP for Ogun State at the time. They were the only two voices that I recall that were vehemently against collaboration with Abacha. But the meeting rose on the note that we should cooperate with Abacha. But I said, no, we cannot just rise on that note. As a group, we should form a committee to now sit down and consider our terms of cooperation. On what basis would General Abacha return the mandate? Meanwhile, would he implement the SDP's programs and so on? All these issues should be thrashed out so that there is a written document on the basis of which we would cooperate. It was agreed, we formed the committee. We adjourned upstairs to meet as a committee, but that was the committee that never met. MKO Abiola turned to other issues, to side discussions with other groups that were waiting. And that committee never met to draw up terms of agreement with Abacha. And we left with the clear understanding that we should cooperate. Now, you know what happened afterwards. General Abacha announced, obviously, a very brief tenure and a return to democratic process. And the rest is history. I've heard many versions of how that happened. But let me tell you that I remember very clearly, on the third mainland bridge, driving from my home on VI to Chief Abiola's house, when the BBC phoned me to congratulate me. I said, congratulate me for what? About your appointment as minister. Now, that was the first time I ever had any inkling or notion about my being in Abacha's government or being minister. So I feigned and said, oh, look, the connection is very bad. I'm driving, I cannot hear you. Shall we talk later? I'll call you, or you call me in about 1 hour's time. Before I left the Third Mainland Bridge, there was this Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria correspondent, Halifa Baba Ahmed. He called me with the same message. Oh, congratulations, how do you feel? I gave him the same response, that the line is cracking up, we shall discuss later. When I arrived in Chief MKO Abiola's house, I found him with a number of people. I recall there were people like Chief Mbakwe, Chief Adedibu, a number of other elders and leaders of the party were with him. Now, before I could even say good afternoon, MKO Abiola launched into a tirade of insults and abuses on me, saying, so I am now Mr. Foreign Minister, congratulations. So you have now decided to take up appointment with Abacha and so on. I was taken aback. I didn't respond. I just said, excuse me, may I please see you in private? He took me into his bedroom, and I told him never, ever to talk to me like that again in front of people. Don't address me like that. Now, the fact of the matter is, as I told you, this is how I heard about it. That's the first time I heard about it. Nobody, even by that time, nobody had even told me officially. There was no announcement yet officially. How the BBC and the FRCN knew about it was the same way Chief Abiola knew about it beforehand, but he never talked to me, which was that press releases they normally send out to the media houses, embargoed. And as publisher of the Concord newspaper, you know, they also had the press release, so he knew about it. But he never phoned me or whatever. So that group that I met probably decided that I was privy to the decision. And I understood subsequently that, in fact, they had sent a delegation to me, but we crossed paths. We never met, to urge me to reconsider my decision, which I wasn't even aware of. So I told him, look, as I always did, I would take my decision when once I'm told about it officially, then I will consult the party, I will consult my close associates, and I will make up my mind, which is essentially what happened. So by that time, quite frankly, as I told you, everybody was on board the Abacha coup. When, as I say, when MKO Abiola and Bola Tinubu went to his house to congratulate him, he in fact bear hugged him, if you remember the clip, dancing up and down that Abacha had taken over. As I said, there were people like Bolaji Akinyemi and other leadership of the Southwest there. So the support was already there. And of course, subsequently, as you know, Chief Abiola was asked by Abacha, and he did give names of people who should join his government. All those people branded as traitors later on were those that Chief MKO Abiola gave as his nominees to the Abacha government. Alhaji Latif Jakande, in fact, it was MKO Abiola who personally stopped by his house on his way back from Abacha to tell him, look, I've given your name to Abacha. Please don't disappoint me. Accept it. So it's a kind of progression, if you like, of the decision of the meeting of the party caucus in his house earlier that we should cooperate with the Abacha government. Of course, the naive understanding was that Abacha would return the mandate to MKO. And I'm sure it is the same naive assumption that made MKO Abiola to now nominate people into his government, now into Abacha's government. I wasn't aware whether he gave my name, but his reaction to me clearly indicated that he didn't give my name as part of those who wanted to take part in the Abacha government. But as I said, I consulted the party leadership, I consulted my associates, and culturally, quite frankly, when faced with such a decision, and one had to make a snap judgment, culturally, one would tend, given the background of general support by MKO Abiola and the party to the Abacha coup, I did not see any reason why I shouldn't be involved. And as you can dig up the clips of the first interview I gave as foreign minister, that I was in this government in order to see what I could do for the mandate to be restored. On his part, I don't know. On my part, no, there was never a break in trust per se. We just had different views at some point, different strategies, different approaches. But breach in trust, no. Even when I was in government and he was traveling or whatever that needed some foreign office input, I would make the arrangements for him to be received by our ambassadors, and when he returned, for him to come back to the presidential lounge with all the protocol and so on. I extended to him all the courtesies due. I maintained excellent relationship with his family. Those who knew what was happening, not these latter-day June 12ers who were never there when June 12th was being made over the years, and who just jumped on the bandwagon after the annulment, and they became the apostles and custodians of the mandate. No, there was no breach of trust between me and Chief Abiola from my side. I had always admired him. I always admired his doggedness. I always admired his principle and his articulation. Maybe his methods were naive. Clearly, it was brought out that the support base for the mandate progressively eroded. No, that was in reaction to some statements he made. It was the first personal public attack he made on me. And I didn't appreciate it because he knew the background to everything that happened. He knew how everything developed. And I felt that it was unacceptable that he would impute all sorts of motives to me, one of which was that I was hungry. That's why I took up the job. All sorts of aspersions which I couldn't really take. What I did do to exculpate myself after I realized that our naive assumptions were not going to take place was, if you recall, I was a member of the Provisional Ruling Council by virtue of my being foreign minister. Now, I felt that Abacha's was a military government, and there were a number of us civilians who were members of the Provisional Ruling Council, which I felt was not right. The military should take responsibility for their actions and inactions. The divisional commanders, the brigade commanders, were not part of this government. They were not part of the Provisional Ruling Council. So they themselves were not happy with the setup of the government. So I met Abacha. I told him that, look, we civilians, Alex Ibru, myself, in particular, had no role in being members of the Provisional Ruling Council. And he should also now bring in the GOC so that they be part of the military government and they take responsibilities for their actions and inactions. Now, was it this view of mine, which was basically to get out of being responsible for something which even by then, clearly I could see, was deviating from the assumptions that we made. I remember I was in Washington in the State Department meeting with George Moose, who was the Undersecretary of State for African Affairs at the time. It was George Moose who now told me, oh, have you heard that Abacha has reconstituted the Provisional Ruling Council and that you are no longer a member? I told him, yes, of course, I knew beforehand. Of course, Abacha did not tell me that he was going to do it, but I know the background because we had discussed it, and I was relieved. And I was hoping that at some point, when we outlived our usefulness, he would probably now reshuffle the government and relieve us of our duties as ministers. Of course, in my case, that didn't come to pass. Clearly, I was useful hostage, so to speak. And so life went on. You know, there is this misconception about what the Ministry of Internal Affairs did, or even now does. Remember I told you that I got myself out of responsibility for the actions of the military government by persuading General Abacha to constitute his Provisional Ruling Council of Military Men. Now, they took those decisions. As Minister of Internal Affairs, there was no role in decision-making. The only role one might have is, well, one did have, not directly, but through the prison service, was taking custody of convicted persons. I remember the most widely reported human rights abuse case was that of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 7, 9. Now, I wasn't involved in any shape or form in that decision. In fact, when I got wind that the Provisional Ruling Council was going to affirm the sentence of hanging by death, I was in my office. The Provisional Ruling Council were meeting. I came over and asked that please Abacha should receive me for 5 minutes. He left the council meeting. He called Alhaji Kumasi, who was then the Inspector General of Police. He called Agbamuche, who was the Attorney General. He called Gidado Idris, who was the Secretary to Government. And he called Alhaji Gwarzo, who was the National Security Advisor. Of those, Kumasi, Gwarzo, and Gidado Idris are still alive. We went to his office, and he asked me what did I want to see him up for, that I called him out of the council meeting. I said, look, I heard that you are about to confirm the death sentence on the Ogoni 9. That would be the gravest mistake you would make. And I laid out to him, as if it was a script, what would follow such a decision. The reaction of the international community, the reaction of even the Nigerian people. That would be a very unjust decision to take. Unfortunately, I had no supporter in that group. Much to my disappointment, I'm sorry he's dead. He cannot speak for himself, but the others alive are witnesses. Agbamuche, the Attorney General, was the fiercest in defending the position. And of course, mine was to advise. After arguing for some time, I left the matters and went back to my office. Now, after they took the decision, the Secretary to Government, Alhaji Gidado Idris, now wrote me saying the Provisional Ruling Council have taken this decision, arrange for their hanging. I was flabbergasted. He was aware of my position. He was there at the meeting in General Abacha's office. And even if it was my responsibility, surely he would not write to me to enforce a decision that I vehemently opposed. So I wrote back to him. I said, no, it's not my job to enforce this decision. I quoted to him an antiquated law of the 1930s or 40s regarding hanging. And that law was talking about the sheriff, about the bailiff, about this and that. And I said, I don't know which one of them refers to me as Minister of Internal Affairs. I think you better find your bailiffs and your sheriffs to do that job for you. Next thing I heard was that they were hung. Of course, I heard afterwards that, in fact, the prison service did not even have serving hangmen. They had to go and find retired hangmen from Sokoto and somewhere else to go and do the job.
The story is not yet concluded, as in the next part, Ambassador Kingibe reflects on what it was like being in General Abacha's government, the perception of the administrative ability of General Abacha, and the final moments of Chief MQ Abiola. Watch out for the concluding part of the Untold story, only on NTA Network.